where are we headed as a species?
Jesus on the cross at the moment of crucifixion, Buddha at his first moment of enlightenment sitting under the tree, what we call God, the being before there's the existence of being. There's this understanding that, oh my God, it's so simple. It's just so simple.
It's hard for somebody who hasn't had like that glimpse of a higher perspective to make that shift.
If it was easy, we would already have done it, right?
Do you think that it is possible for all of us to reach full awakening like the Buddha or Eckhart Tolle or Jesus in this lifetime?
I will say that I know 2 people right this very moment who are in the exact states that Eckhart Tolle had.
You do not want to miss the second interview with Mary Reed, Mystic Wisdom Guide, channel, and author, where we dive into the reality of spiritual awakening and what that actually looks like for people. Does enlightenment always look like Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree? Or does it actually look like a little bit more upheaval for a lot of us? Mary, thank you so much for joining me.
It is my joy. Thanks for having me back. I'm really excited to talk about this.
Me too. So let's start with a definition of enlightenment. What is your definition of enlightenment or awakening?
This is tough when we use a word because, as I've said many times, words really distill things so, small. We have enlightenment can mean so much. And the moment we just take a word and try to define it, we're already negating so much of what it means. I think that enlightenment is more of an ideal that people are aiming towards. But ultimately, I think we're just meaning to be more aware, to be more sort of divinely aware, to have a greater perspective and understanding, and to feel a sense of ease in kind of general awareness in life. I don't actually use the term enlightenment, but I think that my understanding or my association with it would be just simply a state of ease in the truth, in the ultimate truth. It's not some blissed out, completely detached from the world's state of being. That would be my understanding. But you know what? It's just mine. That's just my definition of it. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong according to other people.
Okay, thank you. I love that. Enlightenment does have a lot of baggage attached to it. Different people have different ideas. So the word that I think you use more often is awakening. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So this path to awakening can be very different. It can look very different for different people. And that's something that I think a lot of us don't necessarily comprehend, because we have this idea in our collective consciousness of the Buddha sitting underneath, I forget what kind of tree it was, and all of a sudden he was enlightened. Or Eckhart Tolle is a modern day example of somebody who just all of a sudden, one moment, he was awakened and he held that state. But for a lot of us, it looks very different. So let's talk about what the reality is of that awakening journey for most of us. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're right. I think a lot of people have this idea that there's kind of the light bulbs come on and then it's all like sunshine and, oh my God, isn't life grand? I talk in my book. My book, by the way, is called Navigating the Wondrous Holy Show of Awakening. And this is a guide for individuals, spiritual leaders, practitioners, and media. And it's specifically to talk about a deeper understanding of the whole continuum of awakening, all the issues that we face, and the different kinds of awakening. So I divide my book into sort of 2 sections in talking about awakening. Those who awaken with kind of catapulting events, spiritually transformative experiences, which can include near-death experiences, but most often it's a profound, embodied realization of some kind. And that's how my own journey began. So I can only ever talk about things that I've personally experienced or what I know from people that I've worked with. I've worked with, more than 1,000 people around the world in differing stages of awakening journeys. So there are those that wake up with those catapulting events that they're kind of jolted out of, one level of awareness and have a totally different understanding or awareness. And that can happen again and again. And then there are people that are waking up without those catapulting events, and they're just aware that something's changing, something fundamentally in them is shifting, that they're waking up to deeper levels of self somehow. And they each have their own trials and tribulations and their benefits for that. But those are kind of the two general paths that people find them in one way or the other. And I think the majority of people are in that sort of more slow, progressive kind of awakening. And those are the people usually deeply yearning for the catapulting kind of events. And those are the seekers that are always seeking that kind of jolting kind of experience.
Yes, thank you for breaking that down. When I was about 18 or 19, I had a catapulting event where I had a profound, blissful, out of body experience. And when I came back, I did exactly what you just mentioned, which is I like to say I became a spiritual experience junkie. And the only thing that I got out of that experience at that time was I want to feel that bliss again. And the things that I tried to recreate that experience, and nothing was successful.
Yeah, that's what I talk about in the book. So this is part of the issue with, people think it's so great to have these catapulting events. That's just a moment. And then you have what happens after. That's a whole section of my book. The challenge is, that's the shit show part of awakening that starts happening, is that the coming back is often really confusing and hard and whatever. And the world looks very different now. You feel very different now. But then we want to chase the high. We want to keep doing everything, whether it's drugs or journeys or spiritual rituals or all kinds of things. And there's sort of two levels of problems with that. One is that we're constantly then just inciting energy, and nothing has a chance to kind of settle down and find its balance for us to be in a sort of steady state. So we feel a little bit destabilized a lot and disappointed because we're often not getting that high back. That's the main thing, is that we're constantly sort of in a state of frustration in not being able to get that high back.
So it's really interesting. I'm wondering if you have an idea as to what the purpose of these catapulting events are for the people who have them.
Do you like what you're hearing on this podcast? For just $10 a month, you can join Love Cover Life Academy, where you'll have access to our exclusive community chat and our weekly live streams, where we answer your most pressing questions and deep dive into your spiritual practice. You don't have to be alone on this journey. Come join us. We would love to have you.
Well, I think it's different for everyone. Everybody's on their unique journey, and whatever they sort of have in their life plan to learn or to understand, or the lens through which they're going to experience, everybody's can be different, right? And no two experiences are the same. So even if a purpose of a catapulting event is sort of to pull you to a very far edge, to have a vantage point to view life from there. No two vantage points are going to be the same. So if you and I have catapulting events, even if we both come into like a blissful experience of meeting God or whatever, our experiences are nonetheless different, right? So there's all these nuances of experience and difference and learning and understanding and comprehension about these things. So it all depends on whatever purpose is for that person's soul or that soul's evolution, right? No two will be the same.
Even when you're studying near-death experiences or different types of spiritual experiences, exactly what you said is true. No two are the same. People can have the same, very similar experience, but come away with a completely different interpretation for their life.
Yes, exactly. And that's the whole point, is that, when you think about consciousness or source or divine love, whatever we want to call the all that is, it's getting all of these unique perspectives on understanding and learning and experience, right? We're giving, each one of us in our unique being is giving the all that is a unique experience of expression and understanding and perspective and whatever. So that then becomes our contribution to the all. So how beautiful, how beautiful. In this world, nobody else has the same perspectives and learnings from your experience that you do. And that's your gift to all that is, right? Same with me, same with everybody in their life experiences. It's so beautiful when you sort of see the bigger picture of it. It's like, well, of course, everything would be unique. That's the way we're all experiencing all that is and all that can be.
That's beautiful. Do you think that even though each experience is completely unique and we all have our own individual contribution, do you think that there's an overarching reason why we're going through this awakening journey right now? Where are we headed as a species?
Yeah. Now, again, I can only speak from my own experience. But so to answer that, I have to clarify that in my own journey, which has been going on for 24 years now, I started out in the early days and probably for the first 20 years, all of my experiences happened with these big, huge, metaphysical, embodied transformative experiences. I spoke last time on our conversation about going into the body and being of Jesus on the cross at the moment of crucifixion. I've also gone into the mind of Buddha at his first moment of enlightenment, sitting under the tree. I've gone into origin experiences, a lot of them. And one of the origin experiences I went into was the primordial ground of what we call God, the being before there's the existence of being. And in that experience, I experienced source or God or divine love, whatever we want to call it, as an awareness, as pure dynamic awareness that has a singular nature, which is cherishing. There's not some thing that's aware and cherishing. Cherishing awareness is the thing. It's fundamental. And in my experience, the existence or the movement of all life is that cherishing awareness, moving to be aware of and cherish all there is to be aware of and cherish. Right? So this is the whole entire movement. It is always cherishing awareness or God being aware of God. All the ways that God can be aware or source can be aware, divine love can love. So in that, the ultimate purpose is that we have completed the exploration of sort of this fear-based separation ideology of exploring all there is to be aware of in a hard suffering kind of way, and that we're moving on to greater, easier, no suffering kinds of awareness. So when we talk about what we're waking up into, that's actually part 3 of one of my books, is we're waking up basically into all the things that are ending in that process. And fundamentally, what's ending is hell, the hell of our existence. When I was just talking about this last night with my community, when we think about the fundamental, why there's even a yearning for awakening, why is there even a fundamental yearning for awakening, is because we seek to have the experiences of being without the pain, without the suffering. So this isn't all about leaving human experience. It's about being able to be divinely human, where we get to explore relationships and the world and experiences without the hell aspect of it, without the pain, without the suffering. Thus the reason the awakening includes the healing. The whole awakening journey is constantly about healing perspectives, healing beliefs, healing ideologies, right?
So we're bringing heaven here.
Yes. Well, actually, in my experience, it would be more of uncovering everything that's blocking us from realizing that it's already here. I describe this often as, we're like looking through a telescope at this very narrow view. And the moment that we just do away with the telescope, it's like, oh my God, like, here's the truth.
Yeah, because we're talking about awakening. We're awakening to the fact that it's already here.
Precisely. That we're not just this thing. We're not this individual separate thing. Oh my God, we're already all of it. This is that unitive consciousness.
I have to say, I love that phrase, cherishing awareness. I love it. I talk to a lot of people, near-death experiencers primarily, who have experienced source, what we would call source. And different people have different terms, but that has to be probably my favorite.
It was really what was, I often talk about this when we have and I'm sure you know this from your own experience, when we come into those catapulting experiences and we're in that other realm, that other level of awareness, there's this understanding that, oh my God, it's so simple. It's just so simple. And that was my experience in the cherishing awareness, when I realized sort of the fundamental what's happening here, what is that's happening. It's like, oh, that's so simple. Well, and it's like, of course, just of course, that's how it felt. Of course.
I love it. So we've talked about awakening and where we're headed, kind of more on a collective scale. But let's dive into some of the things that people can encounter after a spiritual awakening. In your book, you share 19 elements that can happen to people that they may not be expecting.
Right. Here are the things that you can commonly, now every experience is different, but commonly, these are the things that people experience. And then commonly, here are the challenges that come right on the heels of that. Right. So those common things are not unlike a near-death experience. They have the light, the tunnel, the sense of no time, often a sense of meeting God, a sense of leaving their body, a sense of expansion and union, not just with a God source or the God source, but also with light beings or loved ones or all kinds of things. But other aspects that are a little bit more rare for people to talk about, but that are nonetheless elements of it, are things like it's hyper real. We have the sense of like, oh, this is reality. This is what's really real. And that juxtaposition of coming into that hyper real awareness and then back into this realm is very sharp. It's like, oh, Lord. And I used to talk about this. I called it the mystic in the Coke bottle. When I would come back from a big, expansive, blissful kind of mystical experience, and then I would have to squeeze back into this body, into this existence. Everything felt tight and distorted and all of that. So this is often the case, what people can experience. But also, one of the very common things that people don't talk enough about is they often encounter piercing humor in these experiences. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've cried just because Archangel Michael joked with me, or Buddha winked, or, my soul group is teasing me, or like there's just so much humor. And what we realize in that is that that's what we come from. We come from this really what I call big, jolly love. And we've had a whole life of living in a world where spirituality is so damn serious and weighty and heavy, and none of that fosters that remembrance. So when we have these experiences and we're like, oh my God, there's so much joy here, so much playfulness and humor, it's really stark. It's really powerful. It's really life-changing, right? It's inciting that remembrance in us, which is so healing and propelling, right? And we also have people often can experience in these other realms, and I'm just saying realms is like levels of awareness, what they'll think about as colors or music or even shapes and things like that, but they'll often say, yeah, but it's not like what we know here on Earth, or it's beyond that kind of stuff. And oftentimes in these colors or sounds or movements or shapes, there's information. There's like wisdom being conveyed just by that emanation. Whatever that phenomena is also conveying something. So there's an understanding that we can experience wisdom in lots of different ways. It doesn't have to come through words or texts or things like that, that it can actually, it's alive and existing within us in lots of different manifestations. Yep. So those are some of the general ones. We can also have a life review. Some cases we can feel a sense of dying. We can feel a sense that our ego is dying or that sort of stuff. So there's, again, there's about 20 of the experiences that people can have, but those are the general common ones.
So have you found these, I know these elements happen in like near-death or out-of-body experiences. Do these things happen during the slower spiritual awakening as well?
Well, so those are the elements of the spiritually transformative experience. So it's a really distinct moment, right, where we've embodied something that feels beyond normal, beyond our normal existence. In the sort of more slower, gradual awakening without those experiences, what often happens is just little ahas. There's like insights that start to come as there's a relaxing of the stresses that are going on, because oftentimes people in that slower progression of awareness are just starting to have this sense that something in them is different, something's changed. Oftentimes, whatever's happening or been happening in their life, they can't tolerate anymore. like a job that doesn't feel resonant with their heart, or a partnership that is like, I can't do this partnership anymore, or I just can't do me in the same way that is doing. So in that process, oftentimes there's just these sort of light bulb moments that begin to happen. And that's because we're starting to more and more and more, again, wake up to ever more of our greater understanding and our own, what's true within us. So those moments are more subtle. And a lot of times the awakening without the events, the sort of yearning or calling shows up in dreams. So people in the dream state will start processing a lot more of that perspective and understanding, and that compelling towards a need for their life to be different, a need for life circumstances to have to change because they themselves can't be it. Whatever's around them just feels too discordant, and they really have to make some kind of change in their life. So that's usually what calls them into somebody like me. They know that they need to change, but they have no idea what that change is. They're just being pulled, but they don't know exactly what they're being pulled towards.
It's interesting that you mentioned dreams. A few years ago, I was going through a really difficult time in my life where I was still very much in, I would call it victim consciousness, and just creating out of such low negative energies like fear and lack and jealousy. And I had a couple of dreams where I became vivid. And in my dream, I became aware of the fact that I was in a thought reactive realm, and literally anything that I thought about with intention would instantly manifest. And when I woke up from those dreams, I received a very clear message. This is what you're doing in the waking world. You are creating just like this. It just takes longer to manifest here. And that woke me up fast.
Oh, you see? Yes, exactly. That's precisely it, is that we get these, again, it's so simple, right? You didn't have to like study that or, contemplate on that. It was really clear. You said you woke up knowing, and it's so beautiful in that way. And this is, a lot of people that are in that slower progression of awakening are often people who've been seekers all their life. They've studied every text. They can quote all the teachers, but they're still up here in the thinking process. And so they're holding everything in kind of an intellectual knowing and not an experiential understanding of all of that wisdom. So those people are often the very people that it's just relaxing. The journey for them is to be able to relax their mental approach to things, to allow things to become more viscerally experiential. And that's when they start showing up in the dreams, right? When they're really starting to let everything is sort of an internal permission to rest and relax and refocus or reorient. That's where the dreams then start really popping up. I recently did an interview with Patricia Pierce, who's written several books, but she's very dream oriented. And she talks a lot about how wise our dreams can be and can really help us when we really allow that to be the case, right? When we're really like, okay, I know that my consciousness is going to be more available here, or my state of receiving is going to be more available here in my sleep. So it's really quite beautiful. I don't really have a lot of that in my own, but there are times where I notice, even in my own journey, that if it's something really challenging or difficult for me, the transition would show up in a dream when I'm out of the way.
Right, exactly. That's what I think the dream state is easier for them to communicate to us through.
Yeah. Isn't that nice? We have so many different ways that we're helped. We're shown that we're in divine companionship always. We're supported. I just love this.
Yeah, me too. So we've talked about the elements of a spiritual awakening. What about any so-called negative symptoms? Not that there's a positive or negative in ultimate reality, but things that might catch people off guard that might not be so pleasant to experience.
That's an important question, actually, because in a true spiritually transformative experience, we're speaking here of a divine awakening experience. And that's very different than like processing some trauma or pain, which can be a different kind of experience. That's often something within us that has been mobilized into a healing, and so it's going to have an expression. So there can be like a traumatic release And then we're going to have an experience that includes that. But the important thing is, on the heels of that, there is a transcendence into greater understanding, right? That we have an ability to sort of see all of that from a very different, higher perspective, a healing perspective. So the transcendence is an important aspect of that, because there can be, and I talk about this very clearly in my book, there can be, experiences that are not actually a spiritual experience, but a psychotic kind of mental instability. And the red flags there are that there's a lot of either fear or paranoia or aggression in the experience. And there was never a transcending into greater peace or understanding or awareness. They were kind of stuck in that layer of energies. And that's when, if not only that red flag, but also then the fear, paranoia, and aggression continue after the experience. Those are clear red flags that maybe we need to talk to a mental health professional and sort through everything that's going on. In the true spiritually transformative experiences, there's not a lot of negative per se. The challenging issues usually come after the event, when we're trying to integrate everything. And we're trying to understand, how do we apply or live these transcendent experiences in our day-to-day life now? How does our relationships change, or our parenting change, or our jobs change? What's the application of all of that information and wisdom? And that's usually where the confusion comes in, because we're feeling so many things in that integration process, and we really want to get through it in a hurry. We want to just be there, be there, be there. And we're constantly in a feeling like not there yet, not there yet, not there yet.
Yeah, and the yogi masters have talked about this too, and the terminology that's often used is in context of the Kundalini awakening, that if people can have a Kundalini awakening, but if their nervous system isn't necessarily prepared for it, they can have some negative experiences or difficult experiences afterwards. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what are some of the things people can encounter first, and then also how can we navigate that?
Well, I should explain that my work is a little bit different, because I work energetically, I work vibrationally. So let's say that somebody comes to me and they've had a Kundalini awakening and they're struggling with depression or physical symptoms. A lot of times physical manifestations will come up, in even broken bones. Somebody has an accident 2 days after their Kundalini awakening or whatever. And one of the ways that was explained to me, because I did have I had like a 10-year span of being profoundly confused and unable to find help. My experiences started 24 years ago, before we could jump on and find podcasts like yours. But my whole life was falling apart. So there were all of these almost catastrophic things that ultimately even led to my suicide attempt. It was so severe, my confusion and despair, which is the whole point of writing this book, is that people don't have to have those really extreme kinds of states. But if somebody comes to me and they said that they've had a Kundalini awakening, their physical body is having to manage that increase in energy, but also the change in energetic patterns. So the way that this was described to me by a psychotherapist that I worked with was, you can imagine as if the light of the divine is hitting the darkness of the mind or our energetic field, that there's a fracturing of the darkness. And that fracturing can sometimes manifest in our day-to-day life. Physical symptoms literally fracturing from within, life circumstances fracturing, all kinds of things going on. So there are some significant impacts that can happen. And I know that firsthand, but most of those things are happening because we're not prepared or informed or supported. Right? So the more that we can understand the journey, the more that we have a sense of orientation about this, the less severe all of these things can be. And the more prepared that we can do with our energetic field, the easier everything has as a way to flow, right? Because if we're not prepared, then there's a lot of internal chaos, and that chaos is then manifest in life circumstances. So the whole point of the book is for people to be able to see their own journey, their own experiences reflected here, to understand the course that's going on. But this is precisely why there's information for practitioners as well. We have a lot more practitioners, either, Reiki practitioners or Akashic Records practitioners or therapists or that sort of stuff. They're having the awakening experiences and wanting to help, but they need to understand the whole range of things that's going on to be able to help everybody more thoroughly. So in my own experiences, when somebody comes and they're telling me all of this, what I will do is come into a meditative state with them to really relax and open their field. And as we're opening their field, we're just allowing for things to kind of unstick, to be more malleable, to create a more natural flow. And that's going to prevent really severe experiences from manifesting as a result of those Kundalini awakenings. But I will tell you that I think that it's getting easier and easier and easier. I think that people used to have more severe reactions than they do now because we've had so much more exposure to information. Programs like yours are serving that kind of purpose, is that we have a greater understanding. So we're not so tensely confused energetically inside. We have a greater sense of, this is an awakening. This is that Kundalini thing they talked about, right? So there's just, again, we're dealing with energy here. We're dealing with vibrational being. So the more that we have awareness that can help us relax, the less tension we're going to have internally that can create those kinds of circumstances.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just the collective awareness of what to expect, which is why an interview like this is so important.
Yes, exactly. And this is also, when I talk to, in my book, when I address spiritual leaders, because, as you're probably aware, and I think that you do a very good job of talking about, the deconstruction of our programming in religious settings, that awakening is driving a lot of people out of religious institutions to something that feels more organic or relatable, but it's also driving a lot more people into some of the institutions as they're seeking understanding. So in my book, when I address spiritual leaders, I talk about normalizing awakening. Normalizing the conversations, inviting the wisdom that people are gleaning in their own awakening experiences into the teachings, whatever shared from the pulpit or whatever shared from their community gatherings, to invite divine wisdom that's happening right now, not in ancient texts, but that's coming through right now to be part of that.
I love that.
Me too.
So one of the things I've heard you speaking about in a previous interview that can happen to somebody after a spiritual awakening that someone may not even be aware of is getting caught up in the spiritual ego, where you move from living in the ego or the separate self-identity, being unaware of the spiritual realm, having a spiritual awakening and holding on to the ego and creating a new identity around your spiritual self. So
Yes. And I will say we don't do that intentionally. Nobody's intentionally doing that. It's a subconscious, we only know how to be in this way, and we haven't integrated our spiritually transformative experience yet. We're still in that process of acclimating to it and reorienting from that egoic framework into something that's more organic and sort of divinely oriented. So the way that people do that often is when they come back from their experiences, especially if they learn something really important and profound, as we all do in these experiences, but something that says your job is to love, for example. So the only thing that a mind or an ego knows what to do with that is what it's known from the past. And so what it's known from the past is that you're supposed to now change people, teach people what's right and wrong. And so the ego can take that and then have an intention to change other people rather than an intention to share the wisdom that's gleaned. Those are two very different intentions, right? And in my own experience, I've had many, many, many big metaphysical experiences. And when I wrote my first book, which I released in 2014, so by then I'd already had more than 10 years of metaphysical experiences, and I felt very compelled to get it out of my system and share it and cathartically sort of process it by writing. But when I was writing my book, I would feel like I was choking. I just constantly was, but I also felt like I needed to write. And when I was doing that, I was trying to write the book in an instructive kind of way. Here's all of the wisdom that I glean, and here's what it means, and I'm sort of framing everything. And one day, as I was years into trying to write my book and not getting anywhere, I remembered an experience I had, and I may not remember this exactly right, but I remembered a moment when I think it was Jesus and Mother Teresa and Gandhi all walking past me, and each one said, "We only did what we knew. We only did what we knew." And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? But then when I was like in a moment of frustration in writing my book, what I knew in that moment, that all that I know is what happened to me. That's what I absolutely know. Not the narration about what happened to me and framing it all. I don't actually know that. I have an idea of it, but what I know is what happened. And that's when everything changed. I then began to, I couldn't stop writing my book. It just came and came and came and came. So all I had to do was tell the truth of the experience. And then the wisdom inherent in that was conveyed potently, energetically, authentically, truly. So unbeknownst to me, my ego had wanted to sort of frame things in the only way that it knew how, which is we're supposed to teach based on this and blah, blah, blah. And that wasn't at all what love wanted to do. It wasn't at all what the conveyance of those experiences wanted to get out in the world. So that's just a personal example of the kind of thing, again, we don't mean to, but we're just doing the best we can with where we are and the capacity of the time. It's extremely important not to do something with your event, which is often a compelling thing that we want. Like, what do I do with this? Not to seek to do something until it feels like it's easy, until everything is sort of really soaked in and it feels like, oh, this is an easy, natural next step. That's the way that we know this all feels ready now.
Okay. So a sign that we're still reacting out of a ego-based consciousness would be when we're trying to make something happen.
When we're trying to make something happen, it's not easy. And you can feel there's a little bit of going against the grain somehow. And it's like we're bumping against all the bumpers and there's not a path yet. And that's a clear sign that you're still integrating. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's okay. It took me 14 years before I could write my book because I had all of these experiences that were still soaking in. So for some people, it can happen fairly quickly after an event. Eben Alexander had he was the doctor who had this big event. And then it was, in a couple of years, he was ready to really narrate or whatever. But Eckhart Tolle had his experience and then sat on a park bench for 2 years and couldn't do anything, right? So everybody's different. Everybody's process is different, but you'll know because it's almost unstoppable within you then. It's like, oh, this just feels like a natural progression in this direction.
I love that so much. I think so much of humanity is still in that struggle consciousness of trying to figure things out and make things happen. It's hard for somebody who hasn't had like that glimpse of a higher perspective to make that shift.
Yes, and that's an important point, actually, because we're in a consciousness where we've been conditioned to achieve. We've been conditioned to get there, to do better, to constantly be the doing. And I teach so much about the end of effort. And that's a very hard thing for an achievement-oriented mind to get into. But when we really start, and these are a lot of the tips that I have in the book for people that haven't had the catapulting events, a lot of those tips are about relaxing into just a different way of being. And this is spending more time in quiet, different environments, or listening to different music, or trying different meditation techniques, or all kinds of things that just take us out of the normal patterns. What we're doing then is just relaxing that habit, that impulse of doing things in this way. And that's changing how we think. that's changing our availability to higher perspectives or opportunities that may present themselves that can lead us into something that feels more easy or aligned. And it's just taking us slowly, slowly, slowly out of that doing mindset, out of that achieving mindset, out of that need to get there mindset. Because there is a form of self-rejection in that. We're rejecting our present moment. We're rejecting where we are, what we are, how we are, in favor of really deeply wanting this other thing. So that's a very difficult thing. I mean, if it was easy, we would already have done it, right? It's a difficult challenge. And part of that challenge is just being aware or understanding what's happening. What are we coming out of? And that's the big piece, is we're coming out of that achieving, conquering mindset. We're getting to the real, right? We're just uncovering everything to reveal what's really true and real.
Right. So another question I have for you along these lines is, we're telling people to stop doing and to just be and allow life to unfold. Practically speaking, in this third dimensional reality, we have to do things. We have to go to work. We have to make the meal, take care of our children, whatever. Is there a way we can shift our mindset around those actions that we have to perform so that we're in a state of being?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, that's a whole chapter in my book. But I'll try to summarize real quickly. First of all, is a willingness to have a different relationship with everything that's going on. Because so often our relationship to it is frustration or responsibility or drudgery or that sort of thing. So noticing, as you talked about earlier, in that mindset that you're in, right? And like being aware of, how am I relating to all of this? My starting point is frustration or resentment or responsibility or, so one thing is being willing to shift your relationship to everything that's going on. And then this relates to being willing to put ourselves in different environments, right? So we're making, literally, we can do little decisions based on contentment, for example. That's a really easy one. Like, normally we're just making decisions on the fly because we got to get things done. But when we have a moment of awareness of making every single decision, even if it's teeny tiny, based on contentment, what we're doing is rewiring our mechanism of thinking and decision making and orienting how we're thinking. Literally, what keychain to buy, or where to put the couch, or what to do with the kids in the afternoon, or what, like, really. And I have this in bold letters in my book: follow your damn joy. Like this, we think of it as cliche, but it's a healing perspective. When you think about how does joy feel? It feels open. It feels easy. It feels natural, right? So if we do that in the tiniest little decisions, then we begin to retrain our decision making and our focusing and being able to make way more bigger decisions based on that joy. But we're also opening ourselves up to whatever aligns to that. Right? Then we're starting to bring opportunities into our life. So a job that we don't like becomes now an opportunity for something that's totally different and feels way easier and much more aligned and more joyful or whatever. So the more that we open ourselves up to that, and we can do that not just in the making of the decisions based in joy, but this goes back to quiet time in different environments. Maybe we go for a walk in a place we haven't been before. Maybe we're listening to music that we haven't introduced ourselves to yet. Maybe we're doing some kind of movement exercise that we've never done before. We're changing the energy patterns. This is the thing. We're getting the unstuck from the scaffolding of our being. So we're letting things be more malleable. And that's the key. Things have to become more malleable so that we dissolve the old patterns. Those old patterns, that old scaffolding, is the very thing that's giving us frustration or a sense of not there yet, right? So as we make those more malleable, we open ourselves up to greater states of being. And that's the whole key. States of being, not ways of doing, but states of being.
Beautiful. One final question. Do you think that it is possible for all of us to reach a state of full awakening like the Buddha or Eckhart Tolle or Jesus in this lifetime?
I think that depends entirely on each person's journey. Everybody's in different, we think of it in terms of linear, and it's not linear, it's multidimensional. It's all, you imagine it like in a sphere. Where are we going in a sphere? It just depends on what a soul is seeking to learn or explore or contribute or teach or all kinds of things. So it depends on the individual. But I will say that I know 2 people right this very moment who are in the exact states that Eckhart Tolle had. And they're dealing with all of the shit show portion of it right now as well, because they both have full-time jobs and they both have partners and, like that kind of stuff. So yes, it is possible for people to have those states of being, and that's a different terminology than get there, right? But to have that state of awareness and being and shifting. And then there are all kinds of people who, thank God, they're not going to get those in this lifetime, because we need people that are anchoring in this stability and this grounding energy of, as things are lightening up, we need people who can ground us, who can anchor us into stability. We need people to run the trains and keep things going in our world as we're going through all of this chaos, all of this transition, all of this transformation.
That's such a good point.
It's all divine expression and it's all divine service.
Mm-hmm.
We're all providing service in different ways. We're radiating something energetically to the collective in different ways that are serving somehow. Some of us are serving through sort of pulling people along, and some of us are the companions on that journey and grounding us along the way to help us stay stable.
I would love it if you could share with people where they can find you, where they can find your books, and anything else that you want to share.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you, Melissa. This is such an important conversation, and I'm really very happy. I think that it's important for your audience members to be seen and to have a greater understanding of, that nothing's wrong with them if they're not having these great big, if they're not in the Eckhart Tolle state, and that if they're feeling like everything is a mess, that's normal. You're fine. That's normal. Good for you. So people can find me at lovemaryreed.com, and they can join my private community, or they can have consultations. All my books are there. I do want to mention one last thing that's in this book that I really want to bring out, because I think it's important to talk about the key missing spirit in spirituality, and that is big, jolly love. And I sort of referred to that earlier when I was talking about the playfulness and the sense of humor that we can experience in the divine realms. And none of the traditional kinds of spiritual teachings foster that. They're kind of weighted in heavy morality and right and wrong and death and sin and, all of that kind of heavy language and heavy focus. And our awakening is helping us remember that we actually come from a very jolly source. We're actually an expression of a divine, happy love, a joyous, playful, humorous love. And so tapping into that, this goes back to making decisions out of contentment, right? We're tapping into that open energy that is very much a natural part of us.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for having this second conversation.
It's my pleasure.
And I will have your links in the show notes so people can find them.
Wonderful.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.